Siamo in streaming e quindi allora grazie, benvenuti e io chiederei a Mauro Leveghi,
thank you, welcome, and I would like to ask Mauro Leveghi, who is president of the Trento Festival, to come here next to me, and Marco Albino Ferrari is invited to sit at our table. For us, it's a moment that is really very important, the start of this today at 2:30 we're going to have the screening of the films of Mario Fantin, and this evening in Piazza Maggiore, the desired screening of the version of K2 with the images of Mario Fantin. And so I like to start with the words with Mario Leveghi, because this is the start of an itinerary that will bring us next year to see the restored version of K2, and in the Festival of Trento we'll have next year an anniversary that is going to be very important, and very few festivals in the world can say they have reached.
Grazie,
Thank you. Good morning to everybody. Very briefly, the Trento Film Festival next year is going to be 70 years of age. It was born in 1952 for two reasons, for two robust reasons. There was the occasion of a national conference of CAI and a local one of SAT that had the festival come about. But what is the reason? The Trento region has always had a vocation for the mountains, and there was an alpine vocation, above all oriented towards, of course, the Dolomites, that wanted to see what was happening beyond, outside the territory, outside the Trentino area. There were no communications like today. News would come in, information would come in, but no information on the conquest and the climbing. So, launching an international survey on the mountain cinema at that time, and that time it was focused on alpine climbing, allowed the city to keep this role as capital of the mountain films. And the will to do this came from the Club Alpino Italiano and from the municipality of Trento. But we have to bear in mind that this internationalization has immediately created an effect. We were coming out of the war. There were walls and barbed wire, and of course there were many things like that were not really reason to be proud of, but Trentino wanted to show up with the festival. But we have to say that the festival has not remained in time as a film festival celebrating alpine climbing. We wanted to cover up the mountain culture. So it's a festival that observes the mountain, the landscape, and the cultures of mountain. And culture is mountains is plural, and cultures is plural as well, of people. Trento Film Festival covers all. So what I like to remember, we are going to present at 70 the film Italia K2 in Italian premiere or worldwide premiere, because this has been restored by the Immagine Trovata of Bologna, and under the sponsorship of the CAI, and this marks an historical dates that are important for alpine climbing. It's an alpine climbing that exists no longer with a military facet and feature. It has become now much lighter up to the
questo punto di vista.
solo climbing of the 80s and 90s. And so more lightweight. Baldi, the Trento director, and FANTIN, and you are now celebrating his memory in these days, was a character capable, competent, but also controversial. In what sense? And he was consistent himself. Maybe he was not understood because he came to the Trento festival since 1952, so the very first moment, and he was awarded a silver medal. But and in 1953 he presented more works, and since part of them were discarded, he made a counter festival with Mozzini. So he organized a counter festival. I don't know how many went there to see his works, and only his works, but then he came back after some years and he won some awards. And well, some people say that he was not understood right away because maybe he had interpreted the festival what it became afterwards, a festival on cultures and mountains and all over, all around. Let's leave out the K2, that was an event, a standalone event, whereas the world of alpine climbing, not always, and also jurors that were there, were appreciating the work of Fantin. So he was not understood. I conclude only with one observation. That is a curiosity and a sort of, I'm focused on this, maybe sometimes too much. Italia K2 represents a very special moment, the conquest of the mountain, the ideological imprinting of man on the mountain. Today there is a completely different view, a view that is different now about the mountain. The mountain now is not that we have to take care of it, but we have to detect it, and the festival told it throughout the years, talk about their changes, because the mountains are sensors of climate modifications in the mountains or in the continents of the north of the world. You can see and you register first certain phenomena that of course that are there before coming here, and then pandemics also came in, which is a sister of all these phenomena. So, and we hope we get out of it as soon as possible, but pandemic is not going to be the end of everything. We will have to consider that the restart needs a new start that can start also from the mountains. I make two cracks and I take away some time to my friend Ferrari. We need the sense of the limit in the relationship man-nature. In 1919, Leopardi wrote the poem L'Infinito, the infinite, and he maintained that man needs an infinite need of well-being for duration and intensity. But since the signs are over, let's rely on imagination. And the limit was the bush, because the bush was, so the bush prevented him to look beyond. So he had to go beyond with his imagination and in time and space. 10 years after, in a city of Germany, Libby, the ones who invented the meat extract for the ones the poorer ones who couldn't afford meat. He wrote a law, and he was helped by others, but ecological law in time, that is the law of the minimum of the limit, according to which the populations the biological organic populations, animal or plants, their development and their growth is not due to the mass of elements that exist, but it's due to the quantity of the element in the minimum part. And it's the law of the minimum that man has always forced to develop more and more the populations. So I understand that this is a provocation, it's a paradox, but the problem is to find back with the mountain, starting from the mountain, the culture of the limit to be able to restart. We have always said the Trento Festival with its works is a sort of base camp or permanent refuge where you see everything and we have an eye on the world and we think and we look at the future. This year, from now on, after pandemics, it's not going to be a base camp to think of a new enterprise, 8,000, but the enterprise that is ahead of mankind and the reflections that ensue is to conquer the summit that man has never conquered, its future, and this is our bet ahead of us vis-à-vis the considerations that all films bring about. Thank you.
Grazie a Mauro Leveghi per questa bellissima provocazione che
for this provocation that comes perfectly because we are at the last day of the festival and we are seeing the peak of K2. So it's right that we should start thinking about the future, what is going to be there after, and what is not going to be possible after pandemics that was not there before. I want to thank with some thanks. I want to thank Angelo Schena, who is the director of the Cineteca of CAI, Daniela Berta, who is director of the Museum of the Mountains. This is really an enterprise that we did together, many institutions together that have associated to get to this evening. And since FANTIN was born and died in our city, and as you rightly said, well, he was not understood. Now, there is a place where Mario FANTIN was not understood was Bologna, and it's the first time that the city, Bologna, does something for him. We have come late in the year of the centennial. At least we have this satisfaction, and I believe that it's going to be a beautiful evening in his honor. And I want to thank Marco Albino Ferrari, who needs no presentation. He is everything. He is an alpine climber, he is a traveler, 50 years reference figure for travels and mountains, and etc. And for the great help he has lent us and gave us to find a balance between images, music, and words. And having been able, in the intertitles subtitles that accompany this this beautiful version of K2 with the eyes of FANTIN, and they accompany it also with the words of FANTIN. So thanks for the humbleness that is really Fantini style in which you have placed yourself in this adventure. Well, these images cleared from the contour that was very rhetorical of these images, and the texts that have been added become really precious and moving. Colors that have been restored bring us back to an environment that are closer to us, but at the same time they're even farther away, and we see that these colors are no longer there, these materials that are no longer there. So this was an immersion in a time that appears to be very far away from us, where the limit was not considered. The objective came first of all. We had to come to the summit at any cost, and this was the mandate that had been given to the chief of the expedition, Ardito Desio. How do we get to that Tuesday, 30th of March 1954, when two siren sounds where the motor ship Asia sails away from the harbor of Genova, and contains within its belly all these materials of study, 13 tons of materials divided into 400 cases, boxes. They were supposed to be all of the same weight. They could not exceed 60 pounds. And they had to be given to the carriers, to the Sherpas, and they had this trade union mandate that they couldn't carry more than 60 pounds. Not 1 gram more, one less. And if there was one box or one case that would be lighter, we would have witnessed clashes and litigations. So many. How did we manage to get to this point? This is another aspect of the enterprise that was not considered, because you see the heroic aspect, the facet that Mario FANTIN grasped of the mountain, but there is a whole preparation that is very fascinating. We should understand that these types of enterprise are within the history of alpine climbing, not as an avant-garde. The great expeditions on Himalayan chains are backguard. We know alpine climbing start in the end of 1700, and it's scientists participate and they try to understand the physiology and the various insight aspects that Great Mother of Earth or Cogoli, majestic mountain, K2. On our mountains, on alpine mountains, the toponomastic came in later on, mid-700. Mount Monte Bianco was called that way because one realized the existence of this mountain. Before there was ignoring them, because ignoring these mountains, because before they just represented a threat behind the barrier of superstition and the exorcism that priests would make on the glaciers so that the glacier would not advance, and spirits were crowding them, and the places were anti-human and inhuman. The toponyms come from maledictus, maledice, momale, and or the pen god of Romans, Pennavaria, Mount Penna, etc. Then we know the history of alpinism, of alpine climbing, or rather than this history, is how one realized of the existence of the mountains and how it is invented. Today we look at the mountains through a cultural glance, so an added value that is placed in our eyes in order to see these mountains as beautiful. So this gap that comes from the past identifies us and tells us that the beauty of mountains is not something immanent of the mountains, but it resides in our eyes, in our glance. So these first scientists go and up high on the glaciers to reveal these physical phenomena and what are the glaciers and what fossils. And after the Napoleon battles and after the Napoleon time, after restoration, Europe enters in full title to the Romantic century.
So the mountain became very important through this process, so the wild nature became aesthetics, and so the mountain became very important. So Romanticism identified the mountain as the element of choice, because people are small, and then there is the large, wide mountain, and there is fear, and this part of this category of climbing, where you challenge fear, you come to a place that is forbidden, you cannot inhabit the summits, but stay there for a couple of minutes or hours. So we find the romantic mountain climbing. Then there are alpine clubs, the first 1857, in Britain, and then the Switzerland, mid-19th century. Then we have the institutionalization of climbing, and this great adventure starts. And then the first climbing of the Alps by British climbers and other climbers. So this Freshfield is one of the founders of the British Alpine Club. He said, our member required to be able to draw. What's the meaning of that? Because you have to draw mountains. The exploration takes place in places which is far away. You cannot see it. The audiences cannot follow the climber moving up, going up. So the climbing must be retold through literature as a testimony, first of all, and then through drawing, and then photography, and then early 20th century through cinema. And we get into fiction because, and then we see Fantin in this case. So telling an endeavor which would have become invisible otherwise. So the mountain literature, besides this necessary trait of providing testimony of what is invisible, followed another task. Why should we risk one's life being cold, going starving, all the difficulties to reach the summit? Why? Climbers answered this question and gave an answer to that question. And these answers reflect, remember, or recall the culture of the time. So then in the 19th century, we find the emphasis, a religious emphasis of climbing. Tomorrow I'm going to the mountain, and the mountain will be inside me. Or Tyndall said, but I don't remember the exact words. Tomorrow I prepare myself to climb in a climate of fasting and praying. Of course, we get in the positivism, the age of positivism, and so Alps are seen as a series of numbers to be won over in a systematic way, good classification of the peaks. And then the 20th century, the early 20th century, before Belle Époque, there was this starts the adventure of the Munich school. The climbers push on the techniques using ways of climbing the position to the Dulfer position with cords, ropes, and nails, and you have to classify everything. And they introduce the scale of classification of difficulties from 1 to 6 degrees, the Belzenbach scale, and that was similar to the votes that to the grades that you were given at school from 1 to 6. So the 6th level was the limit of human capabilities. So in the 19th century, Mont Blanc, in later 18th century, and all the other Alps, Matterhorn, etc. But the British were the one in a bit of a colonialistic spirit, immersed in the exoticism. So the first zoo was open in London in early 19th century, and lions would roar at night. And the myth of the exoticism, going away to conquer and to own it and possess it, no limits. The world should be limitless, and that you went to Black Africa, the poles, the northwest, northeast passage. The Alps were the play field of these British alpine climbers that managed to conquer the summit, to bring back a story to tell. and all they had these very elegant halls, conference halls, and then people would tell their stories, telling their adventures, and so what they did in the summer campaign. Then in the 20th century, with the prevailing culture, climbing came to the golden time of the 6th level. You have to find difficulties so to climb the rough walls. The northern Highger, north Jurassic, north of another mountain. So these are goals that in the 1930s brought the climbers glory and death, because these walls are very steep and very dangerous. So at the time there was a totalitarianism, so he exalted the cult of the good death. The German blonde heroes should get to the summit for the tyranny, and so to show that, so they showed the first north of Eiger with the picture next to the body of people who had died climbing it, and then Switzerland say, we don't want to have all these dead, let's stop. So then stop having all these dead people, and then so this was the climate in the 1930s. And why I'm saying that extra-European climbing in 1930s, 1950s is quite late, because they have still the 19th century spirit of conquering the exotic, the unknown, with great means, great transfer of equipment far away on the other side of the world. So this is away from the alpine climbing story, climbing that in between the great exploration mission, so military-wise, nationalistic, you have to bring the culture, the flag, and also conquer the area with technical difficulties, but a great collective effort to put the ropes, set cords and ropes so also to get to the summit, thanks to the placing of the ropes, like you do on the Himalayas. And so this is still a culture that is a bit coming late vis-à-vis the one that you do on the alpine climbing, but the same climbers from the Alps moved abroad. They have to adjust to rationale which are different from theirs. Individualism of climbers, alpine climbers, in this anarchic spirit is not always in tune with a group climbing, an expedition with several climbers, and so it's quite difficult to do that. To the placing of the K2 before 1954 was attempted 5 times. The first from the UK, 1902, then Italians, Duca degli Abruzzi, who came 6,200 meters, marking the record of altitude reached by a human being. And also the Duke of Abruzzi merit was to have found the most logical way to climb up to the summit. So this is a rock, a jutting rock called Sperone Abruzzi. So to this great, the different from the Everest, 8,848, the Everest is in a more difficult position to be reached. The Everest on the Nepalese side is at the foot. There are villages with people, children coming and there giving you the white scarf of welcoming you. So the British are welcome there when they go on the Everest. Hillary from New Zealand, and so all these children see the meeting of two worlds, and they are, so there is the affection, the love of a population of Sherpas leading them to the base camp. K2 is a different matter. It is at the end of a glacier long several tens of kilometers, 240 kilometers from Piazza del Duomo Milano to the base of Mont Blanc. You have to walk that distance on glaciers and rocks and ice. So the Duke of Abruzzi came up. He had the strength to get there, and so to get to 7,250 meters, the highest record ever reached. He walks back, he published his memories, and also there is a movie made with Vittorio Sella. Then there are other expeditions in the 50s, 2 from the US, and then another one in 53. Still the Americans, people died. The 38 expedition with the US who witnessed a German who left Nazis and took shelter in the US, a very important driver, almost 200 meters from the summit. He came on that side. They opened the Bill walkway. There are 30 meters of fourth levels of difficulties, and he could not make it and came back. And again, the key too at the end, in the post-war period, had to be reached. 1950, then Annapurna by the French expedition, Herzog Chenal, 53, if I'm not mistaken, the Nanga Parbat was reached the summit by Austrians and Germans, with Hermann Bulling in a solo climbing. 1953, the Everest was conquered by Hillary and Tenzing Sherpa, who was the leader of the Sherpas. So the Union Jack was on top, was put on top of the Everest almost 100 years after the reaching of the summit of the Matterhorn, so by Wimper. And so in this season, repeated these nationalistic interests of the British. The K2 was missing.
After the roof of the world, it was the most desired, the most difficult mountain, the one that is at the left of the Concordia Circle. And as soon as you get there, you find this tall building and pointy that appears to be non-reachable, unreachable vision that stays on top of any other thing for alpine climbers. So time has come to organize the expedition. And there is a key man, Ardito Desio, controversial person, and the regime during the regime had a lot of power, and he was an integrating part of that culture. He was authoritarian. There are various type of authoritarianism. You can impose it in different ways, charismatically, yelled, bureaucratic. Well, he was a bureaucratic authoritarian. I always imagined this man, and Fantin used to say that his orders were all written, all typed, because the paper is a proof, is evidence. So this gives you the idea of this man, a geologist, had diplomatic skills and relations, who was the son of the 1800. He was born in Palmanova in 1897, and he belonged to that world of colonizers that would go to the other side of the world, and had to flatter local authorities because he could ask for the right authorizations. So in 53, pre-monsoon season, he goes with Riccardo Cassin, and then he stays there the entire summer. And in September 53, he meets the expedition of the Americans, which had failed. One death, they had gone down, they had reached quite a high altitude. And these Americans tell him that next year they want to retry. They need permits because Pakistan governments have to release them, have to issue them. It is difficult because the Americans are organizing the Colombo plan, that is a Marshall Plan for Asia. So they're going to be seen benevolently, and so the requests of the Americans are going to be accepted before the Italians who have lost the war. Whereas there, Ardito Desio makes his diplomatic miracle, manages to go into the embassy, the government puts in touch surely the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and also De Gasperi plays a role. And they say that De Gasperi offers, as an exchange for the permit for K2 for the year after, for the season, for the next season, he offers future work on the big dams that Pakistan they contemplate to build up on the mountains. So when he comes back home, Ardito Desio, and during the journey, there is this famous telegram, this famous cable, where the Pakistani Prime Minister Mohammed Ali, that's his name, that was his name, to His Excellency De Gasperi, confirms the permit for the Italians. And there the match is open. The match has two, or in fact 3 times, the organization, the march for getting close, and the climbing. We have 10 minutes. I will try to be as synthetic as possible. To organize an expedition at that time was incredible, a true hassle. And first of all, you had to put together all the funds. So how much does such an expedition cost? Some say 15 million lira, others say 25 million. Others estimate 100 million. At the end, they were 150 million, an absolutely outrageous figure for the time. Because in 1954, 9 years after the war, in 1952, there was a Ministry Commission for Poverty in the south of Italy that had taken the picture of a disastrous situation, congenital poverty. And that time, you know, they do a sort of crowdfunding, and they put together the money through private agencies, the province of Trento, the province of Milan, donations, you know, debts are being made, stipulated. You know, they make all, whatever, how many people will have to be there, 7, 6, 7, 15, and maintain 15 men for all the material, 2 months on the mountain. How much is it going to cost? And above all, organizing the Sherpas. And I want to read what Ardito Desio stated or wrote. And this to organize the boxes. Every Sherpa consumes 1 kilogram of food a day and brings a load not over 30 kilos. Actually, they were 27 kilos, but he rounds it up. So to have them transport 20 kilos, the Sherpa can be absent from the base camp for 10 days because he has to bring also his own food. So 5 to go and 5 to come back. If you cut down to 10 kilos the load for the expedition, you need 20 days, 10 and 10, and then you have to double the number of Sherpas. How many Sherpas? So it's a checker game, and really, or a chess game. Strategy. After finding the money, you have to understand which are the materials, but the Italian industry, is it in a position to meet these requirements? Well, the Italian industry, the shoes, technical materials, of course, meet the requirements of the climbers of the Alps, but they didn't design any boots to go up to 8,000 meters. So we'll have to convince all industries to put together and to start designing, but in very short times, because we are already December 1953, and the departure is set for end of March 1954. So Dolomite will produce 100 pairs of shoes, 3 per person, 1 for the getting closer and the other one for the reindeer leather to go up high. Urdukas is the first stage, Himalaya, and the Super K2 weighing 2,700 grams, and then Greville makes the ramps 12 points, the one with the front points and the horizontal one that allow progression in the face of the wall without having to make steps. So all these contrivances are completed very rapidly, and not starting without having tested these boots. You don't even start on the Alps to go with new boots, so you have to try them on and you have to have them in advance. So everybody runs, and in January they're ready to make the first camp of experimentation and tests on the Monte Rosa. 20 days, first on Monte Rosa and afterwards on Monte Bianco. And then how many alpine climbers? 23. The stronger alpine climbers, some are discarded because their character is not stable, and so they will not adjust to the collective spirit of the expedition, and then they will have to be chosen and selected. At the end, 18 men are chosen. They will come over by plane. One doctor, 4 sciences, one cameraman, and Ardito Desio, the boss. And on the motor ship Asia, there is also Fantin. He was young. He was born in 1921, 9th of May, in Bologna, and he had had some experience. One should tell about all his experience of war in Albania and 2 years and a half in hospital, and he had come back to home in May 1946, 1 year after the end of the war, and the family had thought he had died, and with his funny way of living, he suddenly appeared one lunch of a Sunday, and he had been in a hospital for a very long time, and he popped up in his home one Sunday, did lunch, and then he registered in CAI. He had lived in Albania with his 24 men, fasting, forced marches in Albania. But despite this world of sacrifices, he falls in love with the mountains, and after some months after his comeback, he registers and enrolls with CAI, and he has a strong relationship with Trento and Trento people. And after 2 years, he starts experimenting with the camera, and he manages to... Well, I have 4 more minutes. Quarter of an hour late. So he puts together these first films. He presents them in Trento with this textbook on the rocks that he makes with the Grafford School on the Dolomites of Brenta. And he is welcomed by the critics enthusiastically by the new showcase of the cinema of Trento. So when it is when they hear that they're organizing this expedition for K2, he sends out 2 requests to Ardito Desio to participate, and twice he is refused, and the third he is called to be tested on the Monte Rosa. So he goes there, and at the end he is being told that he is going to belong to the expedition on K2. Ardito Desio, and he publishes on his beautiful diary, K2 lived a dream that is going to be published later, some years after his return. Now, to do the film, you will never stop any climber in marching. You will not have to disturb the expedition. The camera will have to observe unobserved. And this was written by Ardito Lezioni. He said, I'll try be as invisible as possible, but shoot everything. But he was very happy that he had been accepted, that I could be among this small number of people 6 after having touched 6 years after it was the first time a glacier. I cannot really realize it, but now this mountain is huge. Men say it had started. It's of an extreme importance, and while he goes on the motor ship towards Karachi. So he starts this long march, and FANTIN has the first clash, the first slap on his face. He is being informed when he gets to the base camp that his shooting, his filmed, his reels are going to be handed over to another director, and he doesn't know his name because they will have to be edited according to a criterion, and he cannot express his judgment. And so these are the conditions. In fact, he will have to give in the films, the stock every couple of weeks to a couple of people.
E arriveranno in Italia.
Relay transfer that he will, and that will bring them over to Karachi, and during this expedition, these stocks, these films are developed, evaluated. They choose to make a small selection and make a sort of script, while FANTIN knows nothing. He doesn't know anything. He's not informed of anything, of the value of the images that he has shot. But he sticks to the precise mandate and goes ahead with his climbing. Tonight we're going to see this film, a film that is cleared up from all these parts. I would like to tell you about his return and how it works. Marcello Baldi will receive FANTIN upon his return. At the beginning, he had suspicions upon me, and the group had climbed the K2.
FANTIN expected that the movie would assign and given to him, but at the end we came to an agreement because I realized he made a lot of sacrifices and he was really down because of the presence of another filmmaker. So we got to Rome and asked him ideas about the editing, and so if he had the movies done the movie, probably he would have a movie only for climbers. He would have made a replica, a copy of the conquest of the Everest. And also there is the other thing, we find the diary of FANTIN after 8 months of work side by side in the indispensable cooperation of sounding and editing, and I put everything I had in my mind, an idea, passion and a spirit of people living that endeavor together with the climbers. So for the first time we saw the release in 35mm ITALIA K2 with no polemics. But so there is, you have to write the voiceover, we won't see that. Not one word will be spoken. Everything has a constraint. The 25th of May. The film will be released 1955, of course, in Barberini Theatre. The President of the Republic was there, Luigi Einaudi, and this is that it has to be done the same day. A few hours later, Ardito Desio will introduce the film Italia K2 at the National Geographic Society of Washington. So the editing, the sound, the score, etc., would have to be terminated in time to finish. And there are problems. In the beginning, Marcello Baldi says, I thought about assigning that to Dino Buzzati. I called him, Dino accepted. I asked him to come to Rome. He was supposed to stay with me on the editing table. You cannot write the text in Milan. At first he said no. And then he said, no, I'm not coming. I will send you out a replacement, as if it were me. And there was baby Mazzotti. Mazzotti came to Rome and we became friends. He stayed with me on the editing table, then he went to Treviso because he should have called me with the text. I didn't know anything for 1 month. When the screening was due, 1 week before the recording, the text was beautiful, I could not read it. So people would have lynched us, and really, so I eliminated Mazzotti and I called Igor Mann, who came to the editing table, wrote the remarks. We worked 3 days and 3 nights, working without sleeping for 3 days. And when we could not overdo it, we would lie back for half an hour. So we ate bananas and drank coffee. The film had to be ready for the precise date of release. And the day came. Luigi Einaudi was there at the theater in Rome. A great success. Italy at last came closer to the summit of mountains. This invisible point was visible to all in the churches, the parishes, and everyone looked. So 360 million of lira was, and it cost 10 millions. So it's really a blockbuster. And so the critics were not very favorable. Perhaps we should close here, maybe see something else. So Avvenire, the newspaper, said that the color and the seduction and the attraction image to the remark on this on the voiceover, which was a bit too holic, too big, and so we have to separate the material shot by Fantin to what was shot in Italy and the voiceover, and the Cai and Marcello Batti were responsible for that. We love the beautiful images and Fantin but we do not like the triumphal first scene, which is quite chauvinistic. The liveliness of the images, the voiceover was terrible. Fantin made an exceptional work.
Dunque un film eccellente, commovente, nelle riprese eseguite sul posto, sciocco e offensivo grazie alle parti girate.
So the critics were really in favor of Fantin images, but not on the voiceover. They were really valiant. We come to the conclusion, wouldn't it be nice to talk about this cheese dye? So that what Fantini did after coming back, so Fantin is 25 years old, and he started working on the world of disseminating the spirit of mountain climbing. He's an accountant, but he just works. He wants to establish an order, and everything has to be set. And he tells all these really endeavors in a positivist approach. He collects movies. He goes around for 10 years with Guido Monzino, filming climbing expeditions all over the world. Then they break with Monzino after 10 years, and in 65 and in 67 he invents this GIS dye, which is the Italian Center for Study and Documentation of Extra-European Mountain Climbing, and he wants to catalog and order and give an overall view through the recounting of all the mountains that have been climbed by Italian climbers, of course, and he participates and sends 680 letters asking for information to the climbers. Just to start, he does everything on his own, put the stamps, writes 680 letters. There will be 3,500 letters at the end, and asking support to the national CAI, and they promise some money, but then they're late, and so at the end he has this very great work So he put so many things, the objects, documents, paper, maps, maquettes, mock-ups, you name it. He put everything together. He closes himself in this study for years, and then he understands that the way to proceed doesn't have a future. There are too many expeditions now with different, now it is impossible to arrange everything. And so he is delusional. And then there was this theft, so that it was like a stab in the back. So the thieves come into his house, they break in with thousands of objects from his expeditions. The camera is stolen, his trophies, also the prize of Trento Film Festival, and he is desperate. The morning of when you lose something, when you have thieves breaking in, you are afraid, you're terrorized, and you're so sad that you can come to extreme acts. And so, in the last meeting, 1980, every year, the survivors of K2 met, drinking red wine, celebrating this mission. In the last one, in Rovereto, a friend, one of the mates of the group, noted that Mario was different. He was silent. He had difficulties in speaking, and asked him what was wrong. He did not answer, as he was bearing a great weight on his shoulders. Someone told me there was a break-in, that he had lost all his trophies, and understood it was a very bad thing to him. And I thought that that could not be enough, because we could not revive him. We tried to help him. He was really in gloom. In a gloom you could see in his face. At a given time, at the dinner, he disappeared. And he disappeared for several days. They could not find him. And then someone said to break into the door of his flat, and they found him. As he was for 16 hours a day on his desk, and he had killed himself on his desk. And so here, instead of the death toll, we have a call. Maybe it's Mario calling from the netherworld. And then tonight we will see his wonderful images that were put together and re-edited, and for the 100 years of his birth, and then cleaned out of this rhetoric and triumph. It will be a great celebration, and he would be so happy to the place that he owns, that is his home. Thank you.
Marco, grazie per questa.
Thank you, Marco, for your wonderful ride through the time, history, people, events. And I just wanted to thank, because in my opinion, well, I didn't know much. I don't know anything about mountains. I'm a city person. But I did not know Mauro FANTIN, but just maybe a name, Anico, and the trigger was a movie, Mauro Bartoli, working for a documentary on Mauro FANTIN, and this work is alive, producing seeds, and then there are other plants coming out, and so this is just a moment. I just wanted to add final words. All these citations come from Viaggio delle Montagne del Mondo, a catalogue of Museum Mountain that was, and Cisdai today, this plethora of news and documents is preserved in the Museum of the Mountain in Turin, and you can also buy and purchase this catalogue. Thank you.
Grazie molte, viva.